Okay, good morning everyone, elected members, officers of the Council and members of Seagreen, SSE. Welcome to the special meeting of Angus Council on Thursday the 11th of March. Mr McCaskill, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Sorry, Deputy Provost, it's myself today.
Oh, sorry, Mrs Forsyth, I should have known that.
We have apologies from the Provost, from Councillors Lumgear and Moore.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Miles?
Alert audio now unmuted. Alert hand now raised.
Yes, what's your title? Deputy Provost. I have, through my membership of Carnoustie Links Management Committee, I have an interest in the overall project, but no direct interest in this part of this application.
And you'll remain in the meeting, Councillor Miles?
I will do, yes.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you very much. Councillor Hands?
Alert audio now unmuted.
Yeah, I was at a meeting of Murrows and Wellbank Community Council in February when there was a presentation. However, I didn't have access to the presentation. It wasn't an accessible one. I've given it some consideration, and because this is a new application, and at that meeting I didn't take part in terms of make a comment. It was more of an information rather than any lobbying in any case. So given the sort of minimum impact of that, I have decided to take part as an interested ward councillor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hands. No one else? Okay then. Members, in terms of Part 3 and Section 14 of the Planning Scotland Act 2006, we are required to hold a predetermination hearing this morning. Following the hearing, then we are required to determine the application. Now you have the note of procedure in front of you in your papers, and I'm going to ask Mr Hunter if he will present to us, please. Thank you, Mr Hunter.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fotheringham, and good morning. The application we are dealing with today provides for the formation of underground electricity transmission cables and associated works on land at Bulhungy Farm near Monifieth. Members will be aware that Council has previously granted permission for the wider cable route connecting the development between Carnoustie and Teeling. What we're looking at today is realignment of a small section of the cable route round about Bulhungy. Now, this application is classed as a national development because it involves provision of an enhanced high voltage energy transmission network to facilitate renewable energy development. And if we move on to condition slide 2, sorry. Just to give some context, this development is related to the Seagreen development, which is an offshore wind farm sitting about 27 kilometres off the Angus coast. And you can see the general location of the development just identified on the plan before you. Development of around about 120 wind turbines, a £3 billion investment that will generate power for in the region of 1.5 million homes. So a significant development. You can see from that slide that the cable corridor, the cable connection from the wind farm to the coast joins at Barrybudden, just in Angus. Next slide, please. So as indicated, Council has previously approved the cable connection from Carnoustie across to Teeling, just identified on the slide before you. At Teeling, we have the upgrade of the existing substation. That's a £83 million investment project, and that's happening at this moment in time. The 19-kilometre cable route that you see before you extends from that upgraded substation to the landfall, the cable connection point at Barrybudden. So 19 kilometres, that runs across agricultural land. It transects the Carnoustie golf course. Part of it is formed on one of the Carnoustie golf courses, and there are a number of houses along that 19-kilometre route. But the original application considered by Council was accompanied by a detailed environmental impact assessment, and that document provided Council with information to determine that impacts associated with the development would not be unacceptable, subject to appropriate mitigation. So what we're looking at today is a small realignment. That realignment has come about following discussion between the applicant and the farmer landowner roundabout Balhungy. The negotiations have resulted in a proposal for a slightly amended alignment to minimise impact on the agricultural land. And the yellow annotation on the plan before you just gives an approximate location of the area that we're looking at today. So sitting roughly midway between Monifieth and Carnoustie. And if we move to the next slide, please. So in this slide, the blue arrow, you can perhaps make out there's a dotted line. That shows the approved cable route. That's the route that's previously been approved by Council. And subsequently, detail in relation to that was approved by our Development Standards Committee in June last year. So all the details in relation to how the cable would be laid, the precise route of the cable within that corridor was approved by Development Standards Committee in June last year. But what we have now is a minor realignment of that. You can see the yellow arrow identifies the red line planning application site. And within that, you can see the location of the grid connection itself as it would be formed on the site. Just to pick out one or two features on that slide, we have at number 1, we have Woodhill Cottage. That's just in the proximity of Conkeys Corner, for those that know the area. At 2, we have a number of residential properties at the Lucknow area. Also round about that location, we have Barry Downs caravan site, and we have the Panmure and the Monifieth golf courses. At number 3, we have White House at Balhungy, which represents roughly the western extent of the realignment. So the realigned cable route reconnects with the approved cable route just round about the Woodhill Cottage that we see on that slide. Next slide, please. So this is a national development. It's hugely significant in terms of the country, but in terms of what we're looking at today, it's really quite straightforward. What we're looking at is a proposal to form 3 trenches running through agricultural land. And you can see an image that just shows a typical section as to how those trenches would be formed on the image before you. So typically the trench is round about 1.7 metres deep, but that will vary depending on the precise land that the trench is going through. Within each trench, we have 3 electricity transmission cables sitting within ducts, and you can see those just identified on the images before you. Above the ducts, we have a tile and a warning strip just to provide identification that there is infrastructure running through the ground if there are any further excavations in that area. But essentially, we're looking at an application for 3 trenches running through agricultural land in a rural part of Angus. Next slide, please. So the trenches that we're looking at will be formed in 2 ways at this part of the route. The first method of formation would be open trenching, and we have a diagram in front of you that just shows how that would be undertaken. The soil is stripped, the soil is stored at either side of a working corridor. That working corridor is about 30 metres in depth, and we have trenches formed through the use of an excavator along that route. The ducting is installed within each of the trenches, and then the trenches are backfilled, and the land is thereafter restored. So you have an example of the type of machinery that would be involved: lorries, excavators, various pieces of plant and equipment associated with the scraping of the soil, the formation of the trenches, the laying of the ducting, and the subsequent backfilling of the trenches and reinstatement of the land that you see in the image. Next slide, please. So the second means of installation that we have is horizontal directional drilling, and that occurs at one point on this part of the route, which we will look at in a little bit more detail later on. But again, the image before you just gives an example of the type of operation involved in association with that. In this case, we have an indicative water course running across the screen, and to either side of that, we have a compound formed. Compounds typically around about 1,200 square metres in area, containing portable cabins, plant, machinery, excavator, and in the bottommost of those images, you can see there's a launch pit formed. So that's just an area that's excavated, and that allows the horizontal directional drill to enter the ground and form the route for the duct under the water course. At the top of the image, we have the second compound, and that contains a reception pit. So that's where the horizontal directional drill will emerge, and the ducting will be installed under the water course to minimise impacts on the water course itself. Next image, please. So as I've said, Council Development Standards Committee have previously approved the formation of the wider cable route, and those works are currently underway. £70 million investment project to create the route between Carnoustie and Teeling, and those works are underway at the present time. Anyone that's traversed the southern part of Angus will see works taking place at the present time. This is an image round about Panmure Golf Club. You can see open trenching used at this particular point. We have the soil bunded at either side of the working corridor. Just at the left-hand side of the image, you can see the closest property to this area. It's about 30 metres from the working cable route. That's probably the closest property on the entire route to the cable installation itself. At the right-hand side of the image, we see the Panmure Golf Clubhouse. So you get an impression of the proximity of the cable route to the golf club at this particular point. So maybe around about 70 metres, 60, 70 metres from the clubhouse itself to the working corridor. But the working corridor that you see in this location is going across the practice area for that golf course. Looks more like a field suitable for planting tatties at the moment, but through time that's going to be restored. Roughly 8 weeks working time in this particular location, maybe slightly longer here because there have been issues in relation to heavy rainfall, but you get an impression of the nature of the works that are taking place along the route at the present time. Next image, please. So again, if we just go back to the route we're actually looking at, maybe just 3 things worth picking out. The blue arrow identifies an area where we will have underground joint bays formed. So once the cable ducts have been installed, once the land is backfilled, the electrical cables themselves are installed through the ducting, and there's jointing taking place at various locations along the route. Now, this is one of those locations. The yellow arrow identifies the bud and burn, and this is a location where we will have horizontal directional drilling to go under the water course to minimise potential impacts on that water course itself. The red arrow shows a location where there is a high pressure gas pipeline, and at this point the cable route will go under the pipeline. Now, as you can imagine from this image, those impacts were happening in any event. The original route required the provision of the joint bays. It required the crossing of the bud and burn, again by horizontal directional drilling, and it required the crossing of the high pressure gas pipeline. So same things are happening, they're just happening at a slightly different location. And you can again see from this image, the proposed cable route is separated from the approved route by around about 60 to 70 metres, both to the south and to the west on this image. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned the formation of the joint bays, and those are significant because those are the locations where really this is the only point where there will be any above ground infrastructure visible after restoration. So we have the 3 joint bays, 1 for each trench, and at each of those joint bays there will be 2 manhole covers. So ground level manhole covers. That's really the only above ground infrastructure that's left visible following restoration. And just in the top left hand side of that screen, you can see an example of those manhole covers at a different location, but fenced where appropriate with either timber fence and rail or timber and post and wire fencing as appropriate. Again, on that image, you can see a marker pole. So those marker poles are installed at points along the route where there's a change in land ownership or a change in direction of the cable, again, just to raise awareness of the presence of that infrastructure. Again, the type of thing that's not uncommon throughout Angus, typically associated with the underground pipelines that traverse the county. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial image, just shows again, it's annotated to show the approved route, which is the blue dotted line running across the screen. It shows the proposed realignment, the yellow line. We have Woodhill Cottage located to the east of the image at number 1, and we have White House at number 3, just at the right-hand side, sorry, left-hand side of the image. The yellow arrow in the middle again shows the location of the Bud and Burn, and that's the location where we have the horizontal directional drilling. So you can see very evidently from that the cable route moves closer to the A930, the public road that runs from Montefieth to Carnoustie, but the relationship is not dissimilar to the relationship found elsewhere on the route. Indeed, if you look at the right-hand side of the image, just to the south of Cotside Quarry, you get an impression of the proximity of the approved cable route to the public road. So similar relationships proposed as would exist elsewhere along this route. Again, on this image, you can see the location of the Panmure and the Montefieth golf courses at the bottom of the image. But again, not a relationship that's untypical along the route. Indeed, at Carnoustie, as I've indicated, we have the approved route going across the golf course itself. So we're satisfied that at the distances involved in this case, there should be no unacceptable impacts on the golf courses themselves. Activity during the construction period will be evident. It will be apparent that there's works taking place. It will generate noise. There will be activity, but that's all within standards that are limits that we consider to be acceptable. It's agricultural land. It's crossing agricultural land. It's prime agricultural land. But as you can see, that's the same with the approved route. So no material difference in terms of agricultural impacts. The difference is the proposed route is closer to the field margins than the approved route, and that's been agreed through discussion between the applicants and the farmer at this particular point. So this is specifically at the request of the farmer to reduce impacts on agricultural activity. Next slide, please. So just a few slides to show the relationship of the approved route and the proposed route to some of the properties round about. This is at Wood Hill. And again, this is probably the closest property to the proposed variation. And you can see that property just in the middle of the screen. Again, in this image, you can see Conkeys Corner. Rowanlee Riding School sits just to the south of that. So there are equestrian uses, recreational uses, but again, impacts on that are not considered to be unacceptable. In this location, for the route realignment, we're talking about works over a period of around about 8 weeks. So relatively short duration. And there are controls that seek to limit noise emissions, that seek to control vibration limits. There's dust mitigation requirements in place. So certainly satisfied that impacts on the amenity of people that are in the immediate vicinity should not be unacceptable. They will be for a short duration of time. They will be controlled, and there will be no material difference from impacts that we've determined to be acceptable on the remainder of the route. It's not particularly clear from this image, but the property at Wood Hill itself, the closest property that sits just to the north of the A930 road, does have a substantial hedge on its western and northern boundaries. That hedge probably around about 3 metres in height. So that will provide some mitigation for activities taking place in its immediate vicinity. Next image, please. So just moving along the route, this is looking in a southerly direction towards the A930 public road. Again, the blue dotted line shows the approximate position of the approved cable. The yellow dotted line shows the approximate position of the proposed realignment. So the realignment much closer to the public road, maybe 25 metres or so from the public road itself. Works will be evident, but as I've indicated, for a short period of time. To the south of the public road, you can see the residential properties at Lucknow, Westcott side. Again, the relationship between those properties and the realigned route is not untypical of the relationship found elsewhere along the cable route. Relationship that's previously been approved by council, and as I've indicated, we do have conditions that seek to mitigate impacts associated with that. Just at the right-hand side of the image, you can see the foliage, the landscaping associated with the bud and burn. So horizontal directional drilling, as I've indicated, taking place to go under the watercourse at that point, again to mitigate impacts. The proposal that's before you, again, has been subject to detailed environmental impact assessment. So we've looked at potential impacts on the watercourse, looked at potential impacts on habitats, protected species, and no significant impacts associated with this realignment. As I've indicated, the approved route is required to cross the bud and burn. The proposed route does exactly the same, just in a slightly different location. Next slide, please. So just moving again up the route, this is now at the western extent. So the property that you can see in the middle of the screen is White House at Bulhungy. Again, the yellow dotted line shows the approximate position of the proposed route. The blue dotted line shows the route of the approved cable. So the proposal would be marginally closer to the property at White House, still looking at a separation distance to the property itself in the region of 60 to 70 metres. So again, a distance that's not untypical along the route. Again, from this property, the activity associated with construction will be evident. The 30-metre corridor formed relatively close to that property will be evident. Perhaps slightly more evident than the route that's previously approved. But again, the impacts associated with that, the noise, the vibration, all controlled by conditions. We have information from the applicant in terms of noise and vibration management plans that indicate we have restricted working hours along the route, typically from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. And it's over an 8-week period, so relatively short duration and fairly representative, fairly typical of the impacts that we see elsewhere along the wider cable route. Next slide, please. So as I've said, just to conclude, this is a national development. It has potential to deliver significant economic and environmental benefit. The wider sea green development is dependent upon this grid connection. That's a £3 billion investment. It's going to facilitate renewable energy for around 1.5 million homes. It helps secure investment and jobs at Montrose Port, which will function as the operation and maintenance base for the development. And the applicants have indicated that the proposal is estimated to provide around about £1 billion of economic benefit for the country. So this is a development that's in the national interest. It's relevant to have regard to the planning permission that's previously been granted. That decision, the decisions that Council has previously taken, set parameters for the acceptability of the development, and this proposal, the realignment, will still comply with the limits that have previously been set for the overall development. We have conditions proposed in relation to this application as set out in the report. And again, those conditions seek to minimise impacts of the development on amenity, on the environment of the area, and on existing infrastructure, for example, the gas pipeline. So generally satisfied that this proposal will not give rise to any unacceptable impacts. Our development plan policies are supportive of renewable energy development. They're supportive of proposals that help facilitate that renewable energy development. This proposal complies with development plan policy. There are no material considerations that justify refusal. There are no objections to this application from any of the residents that live along the route. There's the one letter of support. That letter of support is from the landowner, who has indicated this has been achieved through negotiation, through agreement with the applicant in order to minimise impacts. But the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. Are there any questions from members to Mr. Hunter? Councillor Miles?
Yes, Mr. Hunter. I think I asked this question before when the original development was proposed, but I would like assurance that any drainage that's interrupted, any drainage channels that are interrupted, will all be reinstated after the project's finished, so that there's no drainage interruption. And the second question, just for interest, at the extent of the application, there are 2 roads. Will they be crossed by directional drilling as well? Or is it envisaged that they are dug up?
So dealing with the first question, yes, there are specific measures in place to mitigate any impacts on field drainage. There's a construction environment management plan that includes specific measures to identify and remediate any impacts on field drains in the area. Again, our roads colleagues have looked at it in terms of flooding impacts. SEPA have looked at it in terms of impacts on the water environment, and both are satisfied that the proposal is acceptable. There are also proposals in place to deal with soil management, biosecurity. This particular stretch is all in the one agricultural holding, so hopefully no significant issues there, but certainly measures in place to deal with that. On this particular route, there is no crossing of public roads, but as you see on the image, there is a requirement to cross the Carnoustie Monteith Road, and that will be done by horizontal directional drilling. Again, just at the far extent of the application site, we've got a crossing of the A92 dual carriageway, and again, that's done by horizontal directional drilling.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miles and Mr. Hunter. Councillor Braze, question for Mr. Hunter?
Mine's a comment. Councillor Miles really asked the question.
Okay, we'll come back to you when it's comments, no problem at all. Okay, no one else? Okay, members, as Mr. Hunter has said, there are no objectors to this application, and the letter of support at page 35 is from the agent for the landowners. So we'll just go straight now to the applicant, and I believe Fiona Campbell is going to present for the applicant. Is that correct, Ms. Campbell?
That's right, yes.
Okay, well, you have 10 minutes and there may be questions from members after your presentation. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for having us here today. I'll introduce the team briefly, so you're all aware of who's available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. My name is Fiona Campbell. I'm the Onshore Consents Manager for the Sea Green project. Responsible for pulling together the application, seeing them through to determination and discharge of all the conditions. If approved today, this permission will be our 10th live permission across the site from Carnoustie up to Teeling. So we anticipate this being the last one. This is the last piece in the puzzle to get sorted. Also with me today is Pauline Allison, our Stakeholder Engagement Manager. She'll be able to answer any questions about communications with the public and community councils and whatnot. We've got 2 engineers, Stephen Reid and Josh Hill, able to answer any technical questions about installation of the cable route. Mike Walker's also with us, he's the lead consent manager. We've got Gavin Kelly, who's our environmental manager, who again will be able to address any questions in relation to specific environmental issues like noise, dust, ecology, that type of thing. And I've got John Hillis, who is the land manager. He's been responsible for the negotiation of all the land deals across the site and is dealing with this particular landowner today. So just running through this presentation quickly, it's basically an update of our last presentation that we did for the MSD applications in June. Gives a wee bit of background about the project in principle. We've chosen not to go into the detail of this particular application because we knew that Alan was going to cover that so well and in such detail. So we'll just run through it quickly. On the first slide, we talk about the status of the project in sort of national terms. This is Scotland's largest offshore wind farm, and now that it's under construction, is Scotland's largest infrastructure project, comprising of a 3 billion construction project that is jointly owned by SSE Renewables and Total, and a 49-51% split. That JV went through some months ago now. Excuse me. And if we move on to what the project will bring, Alan touched on it. We're talking about a significant economic boost to Scotland and to Angus in particular. Around about 400 construction jobs in Angus. There will be your permanent jobs at the Montrose port over the 25-year operational phase of the wind farm, and the operational phase will come in 2022 or 2023. I'm not entirely sure, but 25 years worth of jobs from that particular point. Sea Green is committed to using local Scottish and UK suppliers where entirely possible in that order, always looking to the particular local area first and then wider into Scotland and the UK thereafter. It's estimated around about £1 billion in economic benefits to the Scottish economy will be generated as a result of the project, and as Alan mentioned, around about enough power to service 1.6 million homes. And this is the next slide sort of relates to what we've already committed to do with the community councils and the community in general. So the community fund is worth £1.8 million. Pauline is in detailed discussions with the community councils to discuss the splitting of that money and what they think they'll likely to spend it on. Also, an ongoing commitment, SSE Renewables in particular has an ongoing commitment to STEM-based skills development and funding, and this project has committed £400,000 of additional funding to support STEM development in the area. And then on Balhungie itself, I mean, as I say, Alan's covered it in great detail there, that this is a short piece of cable, a realignment to satisfy 2 requirements. One was because of the way the previous route was hitting the national gas pipeline, wasn't suitable from an engineering perspective. And the second is to make it more sensible, really, from a agricultural land perspective. So taking it to the southern boundary of the landowner's operational field there, so to allow him the maximum area that he can continue to farm. So it sort of achieves two goals for the project. And crucially, you know, we're not increasing the environmental impact on any of the receptors or any of the residents. This is a short-term piece of work, an 8-week construction period, and there are, you know, mitigations in place across all subject areas to ensure that there's no significant impact on any of the residents or any of the environmental receptors. That was all I was going to say. You know, we're more than happy to take questions now if anybody has them.
Thank you, Fiona. Questions? Councillor Braze, is yours a question or is that your hand from the last time? No, that's okay. That's all right. Councillor Miles.
Yes, thank you first of all for coming along today, and again thank you for your cooperation with the local landowners to find solutions to these problems. My question is a slightly technical one, but when excavating these trenches, is the topsoil kept separate from the subsoil? So when reinstated, the subsoil goes in first and leaves the topsoil for agricultural purposes secondly?
Yeah, that's controlled by our construction environmental management plan, and it is a requirement on our contractors to do exactly that, to separate topsoil from subsoil and to reinstate to existing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Anyone else for a question? No. Okay, then that then concludes the business for the predetermination hearing. So we will move now to the agenda item number 4, which is the determining the application. At this point, comments from members before I ask Councillor Nicholl to speak. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Of course, this project in its entirety will have huge benefits, not just for the people of Angus, but the whole of Scotland, and the environmental benefits will be good for the whole of the world and for generations to come. However, the consequences of the cable laying across agricultural land will affect that land for generations to come too. And no matter how careful the contractors are and how much attention they pay to trying to connect up field drains, etc., there will be problems. And the landowner on this particular stretch has indicated that he would like it rerouted for, I'm sure, very sound reasons, and he will have to live with the consequences and farm round the consequences of the route taking over his land for generations to come too. So I also note that there are no objections to this, so I'm very comfortable with this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Braze. Anyone else for comment? Okay then, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I've read the officer's report and I've listened to the presentation today. I am familiar with this development from previous consideration and application at Council and Development Standards Committee. While this application is a small part of a larger grid connection route, this proposal is a national development and it is of national significance. The Sea Green development represents a massive investment. It will generate power for over 1 million homes, create in the region of 400 jobs, and bring over 1 billion economic benefit to the country. Sea Green has confirmed that Montrose Harbour will be used for the operation and maintenance of its offshore wind farm, and that will provide long-term economic benefit for Angus. I am proud of this council and our Development Standards Committee and our officers have been able to progress application for this national development during this difficult period. The decision we made will provide significant economic benefit for the country and help reduce carbon emissions. I am satisfied this proposal does not rise to any unacceptable impact, and I am delighted to move this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nicholl. Members, you have the recommendation on page 4 of the report. Is the recommendation agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your attendance this morning, and that concludes the business of this special council meeting. And have an eventful and nice day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that positive determination. Can I just, before everyone goes, just extend the project thanks to the officers, in particular Kate, Alan and Rory, who have been extremely patient with the project as we go through this sort of complex consenting process. So just want to extend our thanks to them.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Fiona.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.